Everyone, welcome to the Detection Series webinar covering phishing. This is probably one of the topics that has been requested most over the years. We've been doing the Detection Series for like 7 years now, so it's long-standing. The format of these is pretty straightforward. We take a MITRE ATT&CK technique or tactic, or in some cases, multiple techniques. And we basically just spend an hour exploring, why adversaries leverage this tactic, how they leverage it, and then what defenders can do to test against it. We've covered a bunch of tactics and techniques in the past. I think phishing is a particularly interesting topic for us to cover here. One, just because of how prevalent and effective it is, but also because it is truly a multi-domain problem, which we're going to get into here when we get into the detection part of this in particular. The reality is, like, if you want to effectively have good optics into phishing, like, you've got to have optics in a lot of different places that can include, endpoints, it can include identities, it can also include clouds and cloud service logs and SaaS applications, right? Like, it's hard to predict the many places where the impact of phishing can occur, right? So it's not as simple as something, well, I shouldn't say it's simple, but it's not as straightforward as something like PowerShell, where you can go a long way toward detecting PowerShell if you just have an effective EDR platform. With phishing, you've got to be looking in multiple different places. So anyway, today, what we're going to talk about is the technique of phishing. There's actually multiple techniques, which Lauren is going to get into it in a minute. So we're going to talk about why adversaries phish and what defenders can do about it. And yes, Samson, I do have a MITRE ATT&CK flag, I guess you could say, on my wall. I have multiple of them. I got that at the very first AttackCon. It's the only one with like grommets on it, so it's very old and outdated, but it's easily hung on the wall. So we do have an agenda today. What we're going to do, we're going to start with introductions. So I won't leave you hanging. Everyone will introduce themselves here in a minute. Then we're going to jump into what is phishing. So we're going to go ahead and define the scope of phishing across the techniques, plural, that exist for phishing and MITRE ATT&CK. We'll give some high-level stats on phishing as well. Then we're going to go pretty deep into how adversaries are actually phishing, with a focus on things that are emergent or particularly prevalent, things that we've been seeing at Red Canary. Then we're going to talk about how organizations can defend against phishing. I'm excited to do this because we're kind of doing this in a different way this time than we've done it in the past. Historically, in these webinars, since like almost everything that Red Canary publishes on the internet is related to how to detect things, we've usually had a Red Canary person covering the how to defend or detection section of this webinar. Today, we're going to hand that off to our partner at CrowdStrike, and they're going to kind of talk through the ways that they do it. And hopefully we can provide some information that folks who are attending this webinar can use to go out and develop their own phishing detection strategy. Last but not least, Attack version 18 dropped, I believe, yesterday or within the past couple of days. So we're going to talk through a couple of changes there. And then if we have time and there's questions left over from the chat or people are asking them actively, we will do some questions at the end. As promised, let's introduce ourselves. So I'm Brian Donahue. I am a principal security researcher here at Red Canary. I am on the community team at Red Canary, and that means that I kind of do deep surveillance on all of our security operations, like customer-facing security operations team. I find interesting work or interesting things that they're seeing, and I create published materials about them. So for the last 7 years, I've kind of been working in the background on these webinars, helping produce them. I don't think I've ever actually been on a detection series webinar, but I'll let someone else figure out if that's true or not. Now, going down the line, Lauren, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I'm Lauren Lusty. I'm currently the Attack Enterprise lead. I've been in that role for about 6 months now, but have been on the Attack team doing sort of technique development for a few years. I've been at MITRE for 12 years now. So it's been my one and only job straight out of my master's in computer science. I'm excited to talk about phishing today.
All right, Hari, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thanks, Brian. So I'm Hari Pulapaka. I am Director of Content for Endpoint at CrowdStrike. I actually joined CrowdStrike only a few months ago after spending many, many, many years at Microsoft working in core Windows. And so my area of sort of remit here in CrowdStrike is to focus on detection and the sensor platform that CrowdStrike builds and provides. And my one sort of promise to you all is I'll hopefully try to keep the detection slides a little bit generic and not try to pitch you CrowdStrike.
All right, last but not least, Alex Walston.
Hey everyone, Alex here. So Brett Hunter here at Red Canary. Kind of focus on the identity cloud side of the house. If you're a customer of Red Canary, maybe you've talked to me. Yeah, just looking out in the identity area, kind of proactively trying to find threats.
All right, great. So let's go ahead and let me hand it off to Lauren to kind of define the scope of phishing that we're going to be working with during this webinar. So to ask a leading question, Lauren, how many phishing techniques are there in MITRE ATT&CK?
Yeah, that's a good question, Brian. Well, first of all, I'm going to start with what phishing is sort of generically. So phishing is a form of social engineering where an adversary is attempting to gain access to credentials or devices or data. It can be broad or targeted, which frequently is called spear phishing, and can be delivered through a variety of mechanisms. But MITRE ATT&CK can't be that simple, so we have to have multiple phishing techniques. So we're going to play a little Sesame Street counting game as we go through these slides, see how many we can get up to. So this one that we have up first is phishing for information. So that's within the enterprise matrix. For those of you who aren't aware, attack has three matrices: enterprise, ICS, and mobile. So of these three, phishing for information is an enterprise. The tactic of this one is reconnaissance. And so the goal when we're talking about T1598 is to gather data or information or credentials or access tokens. And it has four sub-techniques: spear phishing service, spear phishing attachment, spear phishing link, and spear phishing voice. So the next second MITRE ATT&CK technique that we'll talk about related to phishing is T1566. So this is different because it falls under the tactic of initial access. So the goal is to gain access by executing malicious code on victim systems. And this also has four sub-techniques that are very similar to the phishing for information sub-techniques in their naming, but description and detections, procedure examples, all that are different.
If I had to guess, and I don't because I helped create the slides for this webinar, I would say that this is probably the part of phishing that most of the content today is going to focus on.
I mean, I think that's a good question. I think the line, there's a couple places where the line between these two blur. So for one example that comes to mind is like consent phishing, right? Granting authorization to an application. Is that gathering a credential or is it getting initial access?
That is a good question.
Yeah, it's a good question that we we made it had a discussion about on the attack team not too long ago. We landed on the side of initial access, but as with anything attack, we can change our mind. So if anyone wants to disagree on that and bring it to us, we're happy to have that discussion.
Technically, everything is execution.
And also defense evasion.
All right, and we got one more here. Oh, two more actually.
Yeah, well, we got one more in enterprise. That's internal spear phishing. So the tactic for this one's lateral movement. If there's one phishing technique in enterprise that people forget about, I think it's going to be this one. But it's when an adversary already has access to your enterprise environment and is using that to their advantage to gain access to additional accounts or information. So using an internal account as the origin for their phishing to increase their credibility and trust and the likelihood that a user is going to fall for their attempt. And then the bonus phishing technique comes from the mobile matrix. And mobile's keeping it straightforward for us. They just have one phishing technique, T1660, to incorporate all kinds of phishing that happen on iOS or Android devices. And you'll notice there's a notable contributor on that contributor list who is in attendance with us
I
today.
didn't even notice that until right now.
That was my intent. So
I will explain why that is
I think
in a few minutes.
you might get to explain it on the next slide if you want. I believe one of Brian's contributions was the request of smishing, quishing, and vishing to be included by name in a phishing
It
technique.
was actually just quishing. I had nothing to do with smishing and vishing, but we emailed the MITRE ATT&CK team dozens of times. Every time we saw quishing in the wild, we emailed them and reminded them that they should add quishing as a standalone sub technique. We didn't get the standalone sub technique, but we did get the word in there. And so
Well, Brian, we thank you for your contributions to attack.
And so quishy, there we go. All right. So by the numbers, so like just to get our heads wrapped around kind of the scope of phishing. Yeah, I see Erin says she hates the name quishing. We all do. That's why it's funny. Anyway, the numbers here. So like according to the Verizon Data Breach Investigation Report from 2025, 60% of breaches are involving some sort of non-malicious but human element. And then Unit 42 says that 36% of IR engagements were due to some form of social engineering or phishing. And then our friends over at CrowdStrike have been seeing massive increases in phishing, including this 442% increase in phishing between the first and second halves of 2024. And that's from their global threat report. For our part at Red Canary, we have a pretty focused phishing product where it's called managed phishing, I think, managed phishing investigations. I should have looked that up before jumping on here. But we basically analyze user reported phishing emails. And the interesting thing is, well, I would say the good thing is that users are reporting a lot of phishing emails. The bad thing is that the benign emails often look a lot like phishing emails. So only 16% of the reported phishing emails were actual phishing, right? So like some 70, 84% of the stuff that gets reported to us are just like generic marketing emails that feel and look like phishing, which is an important lesson to take home. Like the benign emails that we're getting, barraged with on a daily basis, like a lot of them just kind of look and feel like phishing. So good job by users for reporting what they think are phishing emails. Within the subset of emails that were confirmed to be phishing, 43% of them were credential phishing, right? So a lot of them are going after legitimate account access. Only 6% contain malicious attachments. So like obviously just directly delivering malware. And then 51% of those phishing emails were sort of generic social engineering, which is kind of like a catch-all term for a wide variety of things that might be occurring there. All right, so let's talk about some phishing in action. So let's examine some prevalent and interesting phishing tradecraft. Before I hand it off to Alex, though, I want to go through a few things here. Shout out to Brian Krebs. Earlier this year, he wrote a really fantastic article that kind of explains how a lot of these voice phishing crews operate. And I will say, like, in terms of phishing tradecraft that is extremely problematic right now, vishing is voice phishing is really having its time. Like it is very, very problematic right now. And like AI stuff is going to make this worse. If I'm going to make one AI related prediction, it would be that it's going to cause a boom in sort of voice phishing. And I saw an interview with Sam Altman, the open whatever, the AI ChatGPT guy. And he was talking about how like traditional methods of voice-based authentication for like bank transfers and stuff, like that stuff's got to go away because the AI has already sort of solved the voice spoofing problem, right? Like that spoofing voices of anyone who's even remotely public is trivial at this point. So that we've got to have different ways of authenticating, which I think like voice-based authentication is pretty deeply problematic anyway, but might be time to move on from that. So anyway, in Brian Krebs' article, he talks about a variety of phishing techniques where they're spoofing phone numbers and impersonating trusted individuals. They're leveraging a sense of urgency, which actually is a sort of detection signal that we'll get into later in this webinar, and sort of using legit or seemingly legit text messages or emails or phone calls from actual companies. And then there's also like this phishing ecosystem that includes like auto doxers and phishing kits. I'm going to show you one phishing kit here in a second, but also like role-playing exchanges where people can practice and sharing scripted lines and best practices and that sort of thing. So as promised, like there are so many phishing kits out there that make it super, super easy to create phishing pages, send out phishing messages, and sort of harvest credentials as you go along. So Black Hills has a great article that everyone should check out about a phishing kit called Go Fish. Also, hat tip to the director of Intel at Red Canary for showing me this. This is another phishing kit that it's called Zfish. And I'm just going to like walk through how quickly someone is able to go and set up a phishing stand-up domain. So like they're on a Kali box, they're kind of specifying the things they're installing Zfish from GitHub. And then in like a second here, they're going to have the opportunity to sort of pick an account or pick an account that they want to phish. So they've chosen Instagram. They can specify a specific website. They just use a generic one here. It's not mask the URL, but like literally in the space of 25 seconds, they've got a really convincing looking Instagram page stood up, and they go back into their console and you can see they've got, you know, the username and the password right there. So thanks to Exploit Edge. I don't know who you are, but cool video showing just how easy and fast it is to stand up these phishing pages. So let's get into some real stuff here, Alex Walston. Why don't you talk through some of the phishing trends that we are seeing across our customer base and more generally here at Red Canary?
Sure. Yeah. So the emails that are kind of getting past the email filters here are typically passing things like DKIM, DMARC, SPF, the little kind of low-hanging fruits of blocking malicious emails. And when they're getting in, they're typically utilizing legitimate business email domains as well. They're not using like domains that are set up like an hour ago hosting malicious sites. They're utilizing things we trust and are in normal email correspondence. So I have a link here to the Living Off the Trusted Sites project, which is a super cool project. And it's kind of a repo of a bunch of different domains that can be used for hosting infrastructure, redirecting infrastructure for these malicious sites. And just some examples of that. So we have stuff like Google Translate. Google Translate has a feature that, let's say I stood up a malicious domain and I say I would like this to auto-translate to English, right? I could give that to Google Translate and they would give me a temporary URL. That URL would be hosted on the Google Translate domain, that GOG. If you were to scan that, that would show up as non-malicious, being a Google-owned domain. But if I sent that and you clicked on it, you'd be redirected to my malicious infrastructure. To the same point, SharePoint. SharePoint's a Microsoft-owned domain. If you scan that, that'd come up as Microsoft. It wouldn't be necessarily malicious off the bat. But on SharePoint, you can host malicious documents that can have links to malicious infrastructure, or it could just be malicious content directly hosted on your SharePoint site. And then we have things like URL shorteners, tinyURL, for example. These are just direct obfuscation of the redirection to the malicious site. So if you scan a tinyURL, not going to be outright bad, but it will necessarily lead to something bad. So that layer of obfuscation between the malicious domain and the legitimate is how kind of these phishing emails are still kind of getting through the more robust email filters we have.
I have a follow-up question to this, but before I do that, I had literally one job that I was asked to do by the people who set up these webinars, and that was to tell everyone that, yes, this is being recorded. You will receive a copy of the recording in your email. Also, at some point in the future, this will get posted to YouTube. So if you're watching this on YouTube in the future, hello, leave comments if you wish. So anyway, my question about the living off trusted sites, are these just like websites that allow people to kind of stand up their own infrastructure within the ecosystem of whatever these sites are, whether they're GitHub or Google Drive or whatever?
Yeah, so it's a pretty big range. So like from SharePoint, obviously file hosting and sharing. GitHub, same type of thing. And then there's web hosting infrastructure that will, like, a lot of like free web hosting sites, so like Wix.com. You can have like a Wix email or a Wix website that can be nearly whatever you want. But because it's on their free kind of program, it's going to still be a Wix domain. You'd have to pay to get the next one. But adversaries will use that to their advantage.
Got it.
All right, so if you do end up clicking on one of those malicious links that leads you eventually to here. So AITM attacks, adversary in the middle, super prevalent on kind of the back end of these phishing campaigns. A lot of people think that adversary in the middle attacks like bypass MFA, which is not true. They just handle MFA really well. And that's why adversaries are using them. So I'm going to kind of break down how this works just from start to bottom. So user goes to the phishing site. The phishing site is adversary infrastructure. The adversary infrastructure relays the authentication that was just given to that phishing site to the actual party. So let's say the actual party is Microsoft in this case. Microsoft would then validate if that username and password are correct. If they are correct, it's going to then check to see if their MFA is required. If MFA is required, they're going to then send that MFA response to the attacker's infrastructure, which will then proxy back to the user. Users are going to accept that. And then that's going to get passed all the way back to Microsoft again. Now here's where it gets bad. Now Microsoft has 2FA good, username credentials good. They're going to give an active session. The active session now is going to be passed to the malicious person in the middle here. Now they have that active session where they can do malicious activity. The user is then probably redirected to another site. In most cases, it's going to be back to where they're trying to go. So Microsoft, they're going to the Microsoft login page. User might be none the wiser, they just got phished. They just think their authentication didn't go through. They'll try and reinitiate it and just keep going. But the adversary is in and has a session, and they can do malicious activity for as long as that session's alive. And this is typically kind of the starting point of like legit business email compromises we see. So following this activity, you'll start seeing stuff like malicious inbox rules being formed to hide certain mail, like hide security alerts. They'll oftentimes be looking for a direct kind of money movement, seeing if they can get in and start doing wire fraud, if this is an account that does that, or they might be setting up for kind of an internal phishing campaign from there.
Yeah, and like as you're explaining through that, it like I was talking about earlier, right? Like phishing is a multi-domain problem. So it's like as you're talking through this, like thinking about like, okay, where do you put your visibility and your detection to try and stop this? Is like a complicated question that we'll definitely get into in a bit. But let's talk a bit about SMS phishing, another major problem.
Yeah, so most SMS phishing is probably more kind of on the commercial side. You'll see like gift card scams and like trying to get a user's bank account, stuff like that. But there are instances where they are going for these corporate accounts. And when they are doing the corporate accounts, they're a lot more kind of directly crafted towards the organization they're targeting, and they're going to be a little bit more widely spread across the user base. So what I have right here is an example of there's a real SMS phishing campaign. I've redacted a lot of the info on there, but I do want to take into account that that redacted URL after that visit is in fact a legitimate domain utilizing redirecting infrastructure to be passed over. So the user goes to that, and it is a Okta-based login page. It's mimicking the company's background for their Okta, has their logo, everything like that. Looks really, really normal. And this is an AITM site, so adversary in the middle, and so it's going to handle kind of that multi-factor authentication as well. So this is really successful because users are already fairly like comfortable doing this MFA process from their mobile device. So they're just logging in and they're getting a notification saying, hey, you have a meeting with HR. So that's immediately kind of raises some red flags. They're like, oh, am I getting fired? Am I have a meeting? Am I in trouble? What's going on? So they're going to look in there. They're going to be kind of frantically going in quickly, not realizing that they're going into a phishing site. Another portion of this is a lot of mobile browsers start hiding kind of URLs as soon as you go to it. You click on it, it full screens it, you do what you need to do. So in this case, it was pretty prevalent, pretty successful, and it was the adversary in the middle, so it handled that MFA. Big problem here is you don't have as much control over your mobile devices. So some people have, company mobile devices with some mobile device management, but the typical network and browser-based controls are not as extensive there, and you'll be kind of at the whim of the attacker there. So to bring this back to our side, to prevent this type of stuff, you need to kind of rely on identity-based controls, things like conditional access policies and like Okta policies to kind of trust the parameters in which authentications take place. So only logging in from networks that you trust or devices that you trust, anything like that that you can implement can kind of reduce the risk of this type of event.
Yeah, it's funny that the Krebs article we pointed out to earlier was talking about how one of the crews that he looked into will run these operations with like 4 people. And I can't remember exactly what everyone's job is, but like one person is in charge of, standing up the adversary in the middle page. One person is in charge of like sending the messages. Another person is in charge of literally taking those credentials and manually entering them into the login and then the 2FA challenge like in real time as this is happening, right? So it is like immediate. Yes, I will try to get you a link to that Krebs article before we're done here.
All right, so next we got is scareware. So not as impactful, but still raises some alarms. I'm going to kind of cover 2 parts of scareware here. So in general, scareware, it's when, a user goes to a compromised site, they get a bunch of pop-ups saying, hey, you got viruses, everything's going on with your computer, it's on fire. You need to call this number. This is typically kind of the initial lure is calling the support number, and then it's going to be an operator that's going to lead them through the rest of this attack. So we've seen instances of a scareware where they call the number and then they get redirected to, the operator says, hey, type this in. It's going to be like a lure of go to this Google form and type in your username and password. Again, this is more kind of focused towards commercial-based phishing, and it's going to look mainly going for like bank accounts and that type of stuff. But that does not mean they don't necessarily go towards more corporate accounts. This can also lead to installations of RMM tools. That's been a common thing is these type of pop-ups leading to fake tech support saying, hey, I need to remote connect to your computer to start fixing it. Things like that. Another instance here is this login page I have on the right. So you can see this little admin login page, clearly fake. And this could be scareware leading to direct credential compromise. So if the user called that number, they might walk them through saying, hey, I'm going to need you to log into the portal that you see on your screen. And that would then be proxied to the attacker's infrastructure. So next we got OAuth attacks. So while not like super prevalent, they are super impactful when they do happen from our experience. So because they have a very high kind of persistence. How they get sent is it's going to be typically normal kind of phishing email communications of like, hey, we need you to authenticate this way. We need you to get this app, whatever. But when they hover on the link that they're getting sent, it is going to be a legit Microsoft domain. And when they click on it, it is going to look like this view on this right. And it's going to show kind of the application, who's it going to be given to, and the permissions that are going to be required for this OAuth app. Now, obviously, most users are not as security savvy enough to go audit those permissions and say, I don't want to give these to this app. They're usually going to say, okay, well, we're here, press accept, go on. If they do that, they have that malicious OAuth app in their environment, and that's where it gets bad. So that user is now compromised. And if you're going to remediate this, you can't just reset the user's credentials and cycle their active sessions. You need to actually identify the OAuth app, which I'll get into showing how to identify that. But you need to identify that OAuth app, go remove it from your environment, and then you will need to cycle those sessions after the fact because access tokens can still be live from that existing OAuth app. So next slide, I can show kind of how to spot these. So you're going to have a couple different parameters on these when you're kind of auditing your OAuth app. So if you assume you're compromised or you're just hunting for them, you can look at the publisher, see if there's there's kind of a blue check mark that will say this is a verified publisher that's gone through Microsoft's verified OAuth app publisher process. That's not to say that that's 100%. We have definite examples, and I'm about to show one that you can still slip through there, or it could be a verified application that's been compromised. Community usage, this is a huge one. Microsoft does a really good job of identifying usage of these OAuth apps across other environments. So if you see a low community usage, and this is not like a homemade OAuth app that you know that your environment uses, that's a major red flag that should probably not be there. Obviously audit the permissions, see what this OAuth app can do, see if it's overly permissive. And then for authorization, just check internally to your environment how many people are using it. You're not gonna, it'd be very unlikely that a OAuth app would hit like a 100 of your users. It's possible, it'd be a horrifying situation. We'll still have hit 100 of your users, but the likely scenario is you're gonna have a low user count and a low community usage count for those malicious ones. And then I got one example here. So again, ignore the authorized by for this top one because it's a little test environment, but you can see this is the legit Microsoft Graph PowerShell OAuth app. You see permission levels high. You can see a lot of permissions. You see community usage is common. If we were to go down a level, this is for a legit malicious OAuth app. We can see there's authorized by one user in the environment. We can see the publisher is in fact verified. From our research, it probably was a compromised publisher, that this was a legit, they went through the process and they got compromised after the fact. And then we can see this community usage being rare. So this would be one you would go and block and then identify that user and clear any active sessions. Hari, I think, see you raising your hand.
Yeah, Alex, I was just going to make a point. Customers or users are trained because on their iPhone or Android phones, you'll see apps requesting all sorts of permission. You'll have an app that's like, oh, I want location, I want your photos, I want your documents, I want Bluetooth. And most of the time, these apps don't need it. It just makes that the programming frameworks, SDKs, they just make it easy to ask for all. And so users have gotten trained into saying, yes, allow. And so, it's difficult. It's not just a tech problem. It's just a user awareness problem too.
For sure.
That's a great segue into what we're going to talk about next.
Yep. So kind of bridging into there, AI-based phishing. So is a little bit more hypothetical. We're not seeing a ton of this in the wild yet, but I think it's important to get ahead of this because as these AI programs and tools are kind of hitting the market and being more kind of user accessible, it's important to look at these. So a little bit of research I did was on AI in the middle phishing. So this is for kind of targeting any sort of browser or any sort of AI tool or agent tool that can utilize your browser as a means of action. These are subject to being able to be given a malicious prompt that kind of asserts saying, hey, this is our legit IT domain, and you should go authenticate there. So the AI agent doesn't really know the difference between your custom infrastructure or not. They can do some checks to say, does it have an SSL certificate? Is this a legit domain? Stuff like that. But if you do kind of above board, like this might be a domain around for a couple months, it's fully as SSL, it's good to go. It's not going to really say that this is bad, right? It's going to go do its thing and it's going to kind of tee you up to get phished. Tools like Atlas, OpenAI's Atlas, ChatGPT agents, and Perplexity's Comet. Those are some examples of tools that can be kind of used in this way, and likely will continue to be used this way in the future. A lot of research going into kind of how kind of prompts can be injected into pages for these AI-based browsers. But more to come in the future as that comes out. Want to also highlight another kind of AI research article by the team at Datadog. Really cool article. They're calling it co-phishing. And this is highlighting malicious custom malicious custom copilots that you can make in Copilot Studio. So Copilot Studio has the ability to utilize OAuth apps. And as you can see in this little picture on the right, you can see this like continue to log in. So this is in the view of on a Microsoft domain Copilot window. If you utilize this and press that login button, you will then be prompted to that OAuth app screen that I showed in that last slide. So if you then press accept, you have all the problems of having malicious OAuth app in your environment. And how these Copilot are made is you can basically set up a Copilot with some extra parameters saying like, use this context and use this OAuth app, all these things. And this is going to become a problem because users are fairly suspicious of maybe the legitimacy of content in an LLM in these chat windows, but they're not really suspecting, their ChatGPT app or Copilot app to serve them up malware or phishing pages at the time. So it's going to be kind of a new frontier for uses to get fished on.
Yeah, I know that earlier I said there would only be one AI related phishing prediction in this webinar. Unfortunately, that was a lie. The second one is that I think that this is going to be a major problem. Like, we're already heading down this road. People are going to get very, very used to giving AI agents their credentials to access SaaS apps and all these other things. And they're going to exist in the consumer space. They are also going to exist in enterprises where enterprise IT teams are building custom AI assistants to help people go through, their SharePoint or whatever. And like, it's going to become commonplace, and it's going to be abused by adversaries with malicious AI systems. Like, I don't know when it's going to start happening a lot, but I have a hard time thinking that it won't be really, really common at some point in the next few years. All right, Hari, let's talk about how security teams can sort of prevent, detect, mitigate, and respond to phishing activity.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm not sure how much I'm going to talk purely about defending against AI and copilots. I'm going to try and keep it at the 80-20 problem space so that we can capture and attack and defend against the majority of the things that people are seeing today. And so that we can give the most advantage to people. So I think the biggest strategy, in defending is phishing, as you've seen, is you have to assume breach. Like, there's SMS, there's MFA, there's calling the help desk, there's a whole bunch using your phone, whole bunch of things that people are doing, and you have to assume like they will get through. And so the goal here is not to try and block the initial get through, but the goal here is to try and detect and everything across the layer of the attack chain. So you got to think about the pre-delivery, which is your email, your URL, or your how the initial content, and then you got to think of the click. So your browser, you're just going to your untrusted domains, or even Alex pointed out Copilot. Then you got to think about the authentication, your MFA, your Okta, your OAuth patterns. And then finally, you got to think about your endpoint. How is your endpoint? Once the compromise has happened, how are you defending against on the endpoint? And that's where you think about things like behavioral detection, lateral movement, privilege escalations, credit dumps. And so again, the point to land here is there is no one size fits all. You got to go defend against every one of the pieces in every one of the cogs in the attack chain. Next slide, please. And why exactly this is the case? Here are a couple of examples I'll share with you. The Scattered Spider, Cozy Bear are also known as Nobelium. These are all very sophisticated adversaries. And for example, Scattered Spider, what does it do? It does SMS phishing. It impersonates you as the IT desk, and then uses you to change your MFA. It does swim swapping so that it can actually capture the MFA attacks, MFA requests. Cozy Bear, Nobelium, Nation State generated a pixel perfect site for Microsoft logins. It actually it is even smarter in the sense that it does not even do password spraying attacks immediately. It does it at a very low cadence so that you can't easily detect it, because it doesn't reach the thresholds. It uses legitimate admin tools living off the land, so it does Vimy, PowerShell, command prompt. So very sophisticated attacks, and so sophisticated adversaries. And so there is no like signature, right? You can't be like, oh, if only I detect this, I can block them. There is no signature here. And so what can we do? I think you will see me sort of reinforce this point multiple times. AI, AI, AI. I think that's sort of the thing that we got to lean in on each of these areas for us to help out, increase our efficiency. I don't know how many of you know this, but early 2000s, we had the spammer attacks and Bayesian-based spam filtering detection, like way earlier in the 2000s. That was, I think, one of the very first AI applications in the cybersecurity industry. It allowed us to get away from doing basic string compares on words versus trying to figure out, is this a common pattern? Is this a common word? Is this a typical usage? I don't know if Brian, you agree with me or not, but that to me is like really the very first use case of where we started trying to do. Obviously, it's not as sophisticated as an LLM, but it is very much the first original seed of AI with cybersecurity.
Yeah, I agree entirely. I also, actually, I'll let you go because I have a comment, but you haven't gotten there yet.
So now in emails, we got to think about how do we use natural language processing. How do we, people use LLMs to write the email, so it's easy, but you got to think about look at the urgency of the email. Is this really what they typically do? You got to use computer vision to look at the logo, analyze the desktop, do QR code analysis to see if it's the real QR code. You got to understand the behavior analysis of the sender. Is this something what they typically do? And so again, all of these things are not basic string compares. You got to rely on things like AI and natural language processing to understand what's going on. Identity. I think as you've seen with some of the examples Alex even showed, like a lot of these things are not like they'll use SMS, they'll use voice phishing, quishing, smishing. The best way we can start detecting these things is try to lean on the identity protection layer. You got to use AI to understand and establish a baseline for how the user is typically doing. Oh, today they are in Washington. Oh, but the login from a day earlier was in Russia. How is that possible? And so you got to use these kinds of baseline behavioral analysis to understand where the logins are happening, where. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, this is where I wanted to jump in. We were talking about this before we started, but it's funny, like Red Canary and CrowdStrike started at this problem independently and kind of landed in a very similar place, which is like behavioral indicators from your identity provider. Like if you are using well-trained AI agents to parse that data and create user baselines over periods of time, like it is very, very good at finding anomalous logins, right? Like I've said this, I don't know how many times and how many presentations I've given, but like if I always log in from Virginia on a Chrome or on a Chrome browser on a Mac OS device, like something's up if Brian's logging in from New Mexico on a Windows device using an Edge browser, right? Like and AI is really good at building those baselines and understanding when a login deviates from them.
Yeah, it is a really solid value for buck. If you are going to invest something, you might as well invest in this one. Next slide, please, Brian. Again, more layers and more AI. Endpoint detection, as I was talking about, Scarab Spider or even Cozy Bear. There is no like obvious signature you want to go after. You need an endpoint protection strategy that relies on behavioral models like, oh, SharePoint launched a command prompt and the command prompt launched a PowerShell. That's not normal. You typically don't expect the IS process to go do these things. So you don't like, for example, I'll give you this example. A couple of months ago, there was a SharePoint 0-day. Like we were able to block it, not because we knew what the SharePoint 0-day was, but it is a little suspicious when SharePoint suddenly starts spawning a command prompt and starts spawning PowerShell to load .NET assemblies. That's not,
This is something we have to tell people all the time. It's like just because it's a 0-day doesn't mean that you are defenseless. Like the 0-day is a means to an end. Once they use that 0-day for initial access, then they're going to do normal endpoint chicanery that is very detectable. There's going to be encoded PowerShell. Like it's stuff that we see every day.
Exactly. The 0-day is purely, as Brian is saying, is a way to get into the system so that now you can start your standard command prompt. Now you can start your standard cred dumping. Now you can start doing your standard, like how do I steal your data, exfil, all of those things. These are all like the 0-day is purely a way to get into the system so you can do these things. And then the real endpoint defense starts now tracking, like, are you dumping credentials? Are you doing lateral movement? Are you like data exfiltration? For example, with data exfiltration, things you could track is like, oh, this is doing a lot of file writes and it's doing a lot of random file writes. That seems like it might be doing encryption and it's traversing the entire directory. Oh, is this ransomware that's actually trying to go to a directory and encrypting all your files? So you don't necessarily need the 0-day to block the 0-day. You got to look at the behavioral analysis or look at the behavior of what the thing is doing. Cross-domain correlation, as Alex was showing, and I've sort of belabored, like there is no one thing that can actually catch. You gotta have a SIEM or an XDR product that actually is able to correlate across your enterprise. Look at the email, look at the identity, look at the endpoint. Is there data exfiltration happening? You need to be able to do log scale or log queries against all of these and sort of create a relationship across them. Oh, that means that it seems like they're suspicious. And then, I'll say this one more. And so an ideal product is not just something that looks across your enterprise. An ideal product is also something that can do this at cloud scale. So it's getting this data across multiple enterprises and is able to look at the big picture across the internet, across the adversaries. one of the blogs I linked on my slide was really CrowdStrike talking about, hey, we've noticed that ScatterSpider is going after airlines. And so we sort of set up an Intel alert that we sent out. And the idea was because we looked at across all of our enterprises, the telemetry across the data, across the board, for us to understand, okay, look, it's happening, but it's happening in specific industries. And so you want to work with a vendor that is able to look at the big picture and not just only on your enterprise, so that when you get the alert from them, you can put your shields up like, okay, this looks like it might hit us soon. So my point with the cross domain thing is not just enterprise domain, think big picture. And then finally, again, AI assistance. The point here that I want to land is the job of a SOC analyst is hard. There are 5 billion data sources they got to look at. They're going to have a million alerts, and no product is ever going to make it perfect. And so the best way sort of to improve their efficiency, reduce their mental cognitive load, and just be better, is to lean on technologies, to lean on software that allows their job to be easier. So like having AI assistants that tell you, hey, how many credential phishing attempts were done over the last 24 hours? Can you write a query just to go ahead and analyze these logs to tell me if anybody changed their password over the last 5 days? Just those kinds of things. Having an AI assistant that is able to do threat hunting, that is able to just quickly generate a guide, and then once it finds something, is able to help you walk through how to fix it, how to quickly remediate it, how to quickly write scripts to quickly turn down the VM or shut off the VM or reboot the machine or so on and so forth. It sounds simple, but like the better you make your SOC's life easier, the more effective you will be at stopping things. There's a big chart, a big slide, lot of words on it. The point of this slide really is, I was trying to talk about where is the biggest value for buck? Where do you get the most signal strength, and where you should invest in? So everybody clearly invests in email. Everybody has like a lot of good email security with threat intelligence, ML. Most of the people have browser protection. They get access to Intel feeds, so all good. Where what I have noticed, or what we've noticed really, is not a whole lot of people invest necessarily all that much in identity, or if they do, they do a very superficial, I don't know if that's the word, but they don't go the full distance. But look at the value for the buck. I gave you two examples, with Cozy Spider or Scatter Spider, Cozy Bear and Scatter Spider, where Overwatch, which is the CrowdStrike's managed service, was able to detect primarily by looking at the logs for identity. So these are the kinds of things that actually give you real big bang for the buck. Clearly, you want to have solid endpoint. And again, the idea with an endpoint is not just an endpoint that is purely signature-based or even purely behavioral-based on the enterprise. You want a security product that can actually scale in the cloud, that does ML in the cloud, so that it's actually analyzing patterns across the internet, across multiple adversaries, across multiple threat actors, across multiple threats. And so think about the big picture.
I have a question for you, Hari, really quick, and I should have prepared you with this. So if you don't know the answer, that's totally fine. But we have seen a wild increase in detections associated with identities, like throughout the course of 2025, right? Particularly like starting in June, things really, really ramped up. And I'm wondering if you guys have any like if you've similarly observed that, because my thinking has been like it has more to do with the way that we've done detection coverage and visibility. But then someone told me, like I showed them this graph and they're like, we've seen the exact same thing. And it made me question if maybe this increase is more universal than I'm giving it credit for.
I think we're certainly seeing a lot more. I don't know if I have a good answer for the historical pattern or whether, but like you saw the global threat report. We did see 400% increase in phishing. So for sure we are seeing an increase.
Yeah. Anyway, your identities are important. Bad guys want to compromise them.
Exactly. And then the final point I want to land or end with is technology enables detection. Everybody focuses on what is the product I must buy. Is it CrowdStrike? Is it Red Canary? Is it Sentinel, Palo, whatever? What I think a lot of people may or may not always think about is the operational expertise. The operational expertise ensures success. So make sure you figure out what model you want. Is this a self-managed model? So you're going to invest in the engineering team, you're going to invest in the SOCs, you're going to train them, you're going to make sure they're good. Or you can work with things like Falcon Complete, which is a co-managed, or fully outsource it. There's no one right answer. My only point is make sure you're thinking about this. Don't just focus on like, hey, what's the product I must buy? You got to think about the full picture end to end, because having a good SOC team will ensure that you are actually successful in blocking or remediating very fast.
All right, hard transition now. We've talked about phishing. As I said, attack version 18 dropped, I believe, yesterday. Lauren, why don't you tell us what is new in attack v18?
You're not even going to pause for questions on phishing before jumping right into this?
People ask questions in the chat if you've got any. I don't know if we have, I was worried that we were going to run super short. Now I'm worried that we're going to run long. So I think we need to trudge along.
That's fine. I can go as fast as you want on attack version
No, you have
18.
time.
But the biggest change for version 18 was complete overhaul of how we do detections, which is relevant to a detection series. So detections now with an attack have detection strategies, which is a completely new element within attack, and detection strategies tied to a technique, and then has multiple analytics within it. The analytics are now broken down by platform, and then include log sources, like you can see on the screenshot, as well as the mutable elements of the detection itself.
This also is another great illustration of how phishing is multi-domain, right? Like even in this relatively simple example, we've got, I mean, it says we've got 3 log sources. I would say that process creation, network connection creation, you can get all that through an endpoint detection response sensor, whatever. Like, but the application log thing, like now you've got a whole different application, a whole different log source that you need to be able to correlate these things together with.
Yeah, so this is as of version 18, detection strategies are out across all of the techniques.
Yeah,
So
I was spinning through those this morning, folks. You should go and look at them. There's some really, really good stuff in there, if for no other reason than to just sort of get your wheels turning about like how you can develop these sort of detection strategies in-house.
yeah, and so I'd be remiss if I didn't give Lex Crumpton a shout out for leading that effort over the last, I mean, longer than 6 months, beyond this,
I,
just this past release cycle, but she put in a ton of legwork.
I talked to her about the changes they made to data sources last year at AttackCon, so I know that it's been going on for at least a year.
Yeah, and so we're eager for feedback too. So positive or negative, you can bring it to us. And then since I am the enterprise lead, I figured I'd throw in a slide about the new techniques and sub-techniques that came to enterprise in version 18. And I don't need to take everyone's time and go through all of these, but at a high level, some of these new sub-techniques are like platform-specific implementations of the parent technique. So the first one up there, command and scripting interpreter, now has a container-specific sub-technique for container CLI and API. And then for impaired defenses, about halfway down the list, disable or modify network device firewall is a specific sub for the network devices platform within enterprise. And then to just highlight a few more, we have a couple that kind of fall in the ransomware department. So local storage discovery is for discovery and enumeration of disks and drives and volumes, often a precursor to ransomware activity. Uh, and then we also have backup software discovery as a sub of software discovery in preparation for behaviors like data destruction or inhibiting system recovery or data encrypted for impact. And then we have a handful of others that are new. Some that I think are really fun include things like search threat vendor data, where an adversary is looking in open and closed sources of threat information about their own behavior and what has been noticed and documented about their activity and or other adversaries' activity so that they can make decisions about future operations based on what has been already detected and publicized.
Super, super interesting. All right, I think if I remember everything correctly, that was our last content slide. So if anyone has questions, you can ask them. If you don't have questions, that's fine too. As a reminder, this was recorded. It will be available. It will be sent to everyone who probably registered and or attended this. It will also end up on YouTube. I think there's going to be a poll after we close this So if you're here live, stick around, answer the poll. I think it's going to ask you what you would like us to see, what topics you would like us to cover in future detection series webinars. We do these every quarter. So let us know what you want us to cover. If you're watching on YouTube, you can make a comment about what you'd like us to see us cover, and we will see that in due time. So it looks like we don't have any questions. It looks like we've nailed the timing. Good job by us. Alex, Hari, Lauren, thank you so much for joining us today and for speaking and taking your time to help out with this webinar. We really appreciate it. And everyone who attended, we know that you could have been anywhere, but you chose to be with us. So thank you for spending your time here and find a way to reach out to us if you've had any questions moving forward. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Red Canary.